right through the diaspora. Pass the word. Bird is flying high in the New York sky with Radio GBE, Radio in the Key of Life. Friday nights, 6 to 8 p.m., right here on WBAI 99.5 FM and WBAI.org.
All right, and once again, this is WBAI New York, 99.5 FM and WBAI.org on the web. The previous program was The Jordan Journal, hosted and produced by Howard Jordan, heard Fridays at 3 p.m. Thank you, Earth Mom, for those announcements from the Community Bulletin Board. Stay tuned for State of the Arts NYC with Savona Bailey-McClain coming up.
Good evening. This is State of the Arts NYC, where we cover art. And tonight, our theme is Art is a Defense for Humanity. We are so happy to share with you a roundtable discussion with Pam Breaux, who is the president and CEO of the National Assembly of State Art Agencies in Washington, D.C. I was invited to the National Press Club to hear their presentation about agencies across the countries and the various programs that they are engaged in, particularly in rural communities across the country and with military veterans. We will have, as a part of that roundtable discussion later in the program, Susan DuPlessis, who is the program director of the South Carolina Arts Commission. We will have Matt Mardell, who's the director of the Colleton Museum, which is a farmer's market and commercial kitchen, a very unusual combination, as well as one of the South Carolina regional directors for LIS. Also joining with us tonight, we will have Alexandra Dean. She is the filmmaker for the documentary Bombshell, the Hedy Lamarr story, I should say, and it was considered for an Oscar nomination. It was released in 2017, and we're going to talk to her about that film because it will be presented at the Athena Film Festival, which will take place later this month at Barnard College, and State of the Arts NYC has been a supporter for the second year in a row to that film festival that supports women filmmakers. We are also very pleased to have with us Hector Tobar, who is a New York Times op-ed contributor. We will be talking with him in response to his recent publication, We Need Protests and Paintings. And you can, before we actually interview Hector, review the entire article on our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/SOTARTSNYC. That's the acronym for State of the Arts NYC. And you can read the entire article before we interview him, and therefore you can weigh in with comments on our Facebook page, or if you wish, Twitter. We also have Instagram now, so people will also be able to comment with us with video on Instagram as well. So let's get started. We're going to start with Alexandria. Alexandria, are you there with us?
I'm here with you. Thank you for having me on the show.
Thank you so very, very much. As I stated, State of the Arts NYC is a supporter of the Athena Film Festival. So tell us, how did this begin with you at that particular festival?
Well, Bombshell, the Hedy Lamarr Story, is going to play at Athena, which goes from the 22nd to the 25th of February. Mm-hmm. It's a wonderful festival. I don't know if anybody listening has been there. It's a festival that's been holding up women's voices in the arts and film, particular, for 8 years now. It's spectacular. I go every year. I'm a huge fan, and so I'm thrilled this year to be bringing my own film, which is about Hedy Lamarr, who is the Bombshell actress who was the Angelina Jolie of the 1940s, and who turned out to be inventing at night. So she was actually inventing a bombshell, funnily enough, a torpedo.
Yes.
And she was inventing it to end the Second World War, basically. She wanted to give this as a gift to the United States Navy. And it had in it an invention that we use every day, which was called frequency hopping. It went into our cell phones, our GPS, our Bluetooth, our Wi-Fi, and it makes the story incredibly current because it's a story about a woman who had bravery, beauty, brains, and wasn't able to make her mark on the world the way she wanted to and needed to.
Yes, I happen to be a fan of Hedy Lamarr. I've seen some of her films before. And,
wow, amazing.
Oh, yeah, I love old films. Very different from today. The storytelling was quite interesting. And then also the whole Hollywood system was very different then, too. It was constantly cranking out a lot of films. And it was very important for many Hollywood studios to have beautiful women as their leads for a lot of films. And she was one of them. She was stunningly beautiful, from Eastern Europe and coming to the United States, being discovered by Louis Mayer, and coming across, leaving her husband behind. That was brave. And like creating a whole new life for herself.
Yes, she was fleeing the Nazis. She was Jewish from Austria, and she had to get out. And it turned out she was even married to somebody who would become a Nazi collaborator, who would start making munitions for the Nazis. And that's how she knew about these problems with the torpedoes, the weapons being used in the Atlantic, that she was going to try and affect. But she had this incredible life story, that she had escaped the Nazis in the middle of the night, that she had convinced Louis B. Mayer to make her a star while she was fleeing the Nazis, and then she landed somehow in the United States as their next big star, and then would spend her nights when she wasn't on stage with Clark Gable or Spencer Tracy or Jimmy Stewart. At night, she would be inventing with Howard Hughes and inventing with George Antal, this famous composer, different ways to help the war effort. An incredible thing.
Yes. I thought that was new for me. I did not know that she was that engaged in science, and that she was developing technology that we now use presently today, particularly the Bluetooth and certain elements of Wi-Fi. I thought that was quite fascinating. And it says a lot that, you know, we tend to just look at the exterior of a person and we don't look beyond just that. And I think that was the most compelling aspect about your documentary for me, and that was to understand there was so much more to her, and she felt at some point her beauty was a curse. Wouldn't you say?
That's right. Yes, she did. She said it many times. You know, her beauty was a curse. Of course, it was a double-edged sword because it opened as many doors as it closed, and you know, I think she did have to acknowledge that in her lifetime. But it wasn't just about that. It was about a world that just didn't seem to be able to accept her for this complicated three-dimensional woman she was. And allow her to be all of these contradictory things that she was. I mean, she was staggeringly beautiful. She was also brilliant and inventive. She could be very difficult. She could be wonderful. She was all of these things. And the world just reduced her again and again to this beauty that should be up on a pedestal. And eventually, I think it broke her. Eventually, she did stop being this superhero trying to save the world at night, and she banged right up against that prejudice that she felt all around her. And her downfall is the downfall of Icarus, who flew so close to the sun. She flew so close to the sun to actually, you know, feeling like she almost, you know, gave the Allies this weapon that would end the war. And then she had this incredible fall when the world did not recognize her for her brilliant mind, when the world did not accept her as this amazing inventor, and turned around and really told her that her greatest asset to the world was her face.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think that's a heartbreak that many women the world over have had for centuries. And so it's one that's worth really profoundly looking at as a culture and asking ourselves, are we still doing it to women today?
Well, we do it on both sides. So we actually try to pigeonhole women into only focusing on their beauty. And then we also ignore the women who are not stunningly beautiful, but also extremely talented and just brush that aside to say, well, yes, you're smart. Yes, you can do this. Yes, you can do that. But, if only you were beautiful.
Shouldn't you go on a diet and dye your hair and whiten your teeth and maybe people will pay attention to you?
Right.
Yeah, we still do that.
We still do that.
We pay.
Yeah, go ahead. I didn't mean to cut you off.
Not at all. No, we still pay that attention to the packaging.
Mm-hmm.
It is and it is an obsession that we reserve particularly for women. And it can't help but affect every generation that comes along. And I don't think that this younger generation, who are so brilliant and so interested in so many ways in technology and math and science, I think it can't help but affect them all the same. And in fact, we're seeing the numbers of women going into these exciting fields going down. It was up to maybe 30% of women in computer science and other fields similar to that in the 80s, and now we're closing down low 25%. So we're losing ground, and that really, really breaks my heart. And I think that I hope that somebody like Hedy taking her place in the pantheon of great inventors helps inspire some woman listening to this or somebody who watches the film to go ahead and really make their mark and do their thing and not care about the messaging they're getting from the world.
Well, I think that's why I like how good storytelling via film, even if it's documentary, is very important. It's not just about learning about the person. It's about acquiring some tools, some strategies, so that you can do it. I mean, there are many, many generations, our generation, I might be a little older than you, where we're struggling with that, where we're seeing that gains are going down, and we're seeing that life isn't getting easier. It's getting a little tougher, even though, we're hearing these accounts that, we have low unemployment, that everyone's doing well in the economy. And then just this afternoon, I don't know if you heard, the Dow Jones dropped over 660 points.
I just saw that.
Yeah, because of all of that bragging, which I believe is not totally accurate, but because of that bragging, we may start to see inflation in this country, which we have not seen in decades. Inflation.
No.
And so therefore, we're not living in the best economic times. I think it's just very volatile. I'm not saying it's worse. I'm not saying it's better, but I just think it's, a little volatile right now. And things are not as clear cut and simple and easy as people make it. But with good storytelling, we can start to learn, from these various people and their lives. What could we learn from Hedy Lamarr? I'm asking you, what could we learn from her that we could share with others so that they can feel hopeful and encouraged to take the same brave steps that she took?
Well, two things. One thing that's very clear is her life story shows us you don't have to have a PhD, some expensive degree to be an inventor or make your mark on the world.
Okay.
In her case, she didn't even get out of high school.
Wow.
She went off to become an actress as a teenager, but she had this relentless curiosity about the world and a real faith in herself that she could figure out the simplest line, as she would say, between 2 points. And so she could solve complicated problems. And she just taught herself whatever she needed to know in order to try and solve those problems. She bought the book. She did the homework.
Okay.
She didn't need the fancy degree.
Okay.
And she was able to totally change the world because her invention did end up getting used. So I love that. I think that we should encourage invention in this country. I think we are a naturally inventive country. I think people should be tinkering and playing and making things from the time they're children so that they can figure out if they can invent something new. It's a wonderful thing to do. But also, I hope people take away from the film Hedy's message at the end, which is a message that she transmits to her children through leaving voicemails with them. Where she's recording this poem she's read. And the poem is called The Paradoxical Commandments by Kent M. Keith. And she's reading them really with a message for her children that she felt kicked in the teeth. And the poem goes, even if you feel kicked in the teeth by the world, because they never recognize you for your greatest achievements, the message of the poem says, do it anyway. Do it anyway. Go ahead and make your mark anyway. It's not about the applause. It doesn't matter if anyone ever recognizes you the way you wanted to be recognized. What will matter at the end of your life is that you did it. It was in the doing that you will find the meaning.
Yes.
And I thought that was really profound. And I hope women everywhere, and men, everyone who feels challenged this way, takes a little solace in those words and really thinks about just doing it without thinking about the reaction from the world or the applause, because sometimes that just won't be there and it's beyond your control.
Mm-hmm.
But if you can do it wholeheartedly, you can change the world even so.
Wow. Well, that was a powerful message you just gave to all of us, including myself, because I think we all can identify that, where we've had days where we're not quite sure why we're doing what we are doing. But you said it, that she's learned from her life that, yes, you're going to have those rough days, but keep plowing through anyway, because that is the most important thing to living. So now, Alexandra, tell us, before we have to end this segment, how many other films have you done in the past?
This is my first feature doc.
Ah.
So this is my, introduction to the world as a feature documentarian. I have been a television producer for many years, and I've produced documentaries for television and series. And I did produce a series on inventors, which is what brought me to Hedy and this doc in the first place.
Okay. Well, I mean, this is fantastic. This is why I'm sharing this with our listeners. We support the Athena Film Festival. We support this festival because it's about women's stories. And there's not enough of those stories being told. And this is a platform that allows women to share their stories, to help create stories for others, either as a director of photography or as a producer or script writer. We're helping each other to tell these fabulous stories that are inspiring, that should be good for everyone. So I'm hoping that everyone will attend the Athena Film Festival. And next week, we're going to share with folks how they might be able to even get some discounts for the film festival. But Alexandra, I just wanted to say thank you so very much for sharing that. We posted earlier today the trailer for Hedy Lamarr on our Facebook site. Again, that's facebook.com/the acronym SOTARTSNYC. Pictures that I was able to download from your promotional materials page, so people could see some pictures of Hedy Lamarr, see the doc trailer, learn more about it, and then go out and support you and the film at the Athena Film Festival. Thank you so much. Thank you so very
really
much.
A pleasure.
All right. And
I love talking to you.
I hope to see you at the festival.
I hope to see you there. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye. And we are back with State of the Arts NYC, where we cover art. And we just had on our program Alexandra Dean, who is the documentary filmmaker for the new film that will be presenting at the Athena Film Festival, Bombshell, the Hedy Lamarr Story. And we had a great conversation where we learned more about Hedy Lamarr. I've been a fan of Hedy Lamarr. I've seen some of her films, but to learn more about her, how she was an inventor and how we're using some of the technology that she developed in the 40s, and we're using them today, and how we need to look beyond the person and their face is important in this country, because we need to constantly develop innovations where everyone can feel included. With that said, I am very pleased to have joining with us today the writer Hector Tobar. He's also a contributor to the New York Times op-ed page. And I'm a subscriber. I read a lot, and I happened to read this fascinating article that he wrote. It's titled, "We Need Protest and Paintings." And he's telling us how we need the arts to help sometimes share stories that help people to look beyond the surface. And so with that said, Hector, are you on the line?
Yes, I'm here. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so very, very much. I was very intrigued and very pleased, and I want to thank you so very much for quickly responding and joining us. Just to let you know, last week we were talking with Alex Nogales about the Oscars and about the lack of Latino representation with the various nominations. And here you are writing a piece, and I'm saying this is going quite well. And then I just had the filmmaker about Hedy Lamarr. It's just that we need to think about the various perceptions that we have of people. And what you were trying to say, at least I believe you were trying to say, is that we could use the arts to really see people for who they really are versus what we're being told. Am I correct?
Oh, yes, absolutely. I think one of the reasons why we're having this immigration debate in which immigrants are seen as criminals or as a drain on society is because what immigrants do for the society is not part of the arts. It's not part of mass art, popular art. The very serious lack of representation of the work that Latinos and other immigrants do is just, it's part of the fabric of American life, but it's just not in Hollywood films. Mm-hmm. And it allows people to sort of have this stereotyped idea of what immigrants and other working people do.
Yes, and I was very taken back by some of the statements that you said, like art and culture might seem like a luxury at this dark moment with the Trump administration's announcement that 200,000 Salvadorians who have lived here legally since 2001 will have to leave this country. And then you talked about the Young Dreamers that has been discussed on numerous programs. And even last night, I was listening to Congressman Adriano Espaillat, who is the new congressman for East Harlem, central parts of West Harlem and the Bronx. And even he was talking about the Dreamers last night and how unfair they're being dragged into a national discussion and actually hurting these people who have claim this country as theirs from very young ages and don't know any other country but this one, but yet people see them differently. Tell us, some of the, with examples of why you feel the arts can help to tell these stories even better.
Well, I just feel like, I'm the son of Guatemalan immigrants. My father came from Guatemala in the 1960s. And, he is, to me, is a figure as important. People like him are as important as, like, say, a Willie Loman, in Death of a Salesman. Norma Ray, just people who are just, to me, iconic figures who are part of American society. And so we have this image of the Mexican immigrant or the Cuban immigrant as someone who has a very limited role in our society, someone who is marginalized or someone who doesn't really, have this deep interior sort of life that we take for granted in understanding just the average American. And to me, that's what I've dedicated my life to, is to getting the soul of my people onto the page, to get them into books. And I just feel that work is really important because what it does is it shows how much that immigrant soul, the soul of all these diasporas from Africa, from Latin America, from Asia, that sort of diaspora soul is part of what it is to be American today. It's part of the fabric of the society, and I just feel it's extremely important work. And in a time of just desperation and a time of great injustice, it's as important as it was during the Harlem Renaissance. The Harlem Renaissance, which I referred to in my column, came during a period of lynchings, a period of Jim Crow segregation, an extremely dark chapter of African American history, and yet it gave us Langston Hughes, and it gave us Zora Neale Hurston. It just gave us so many great writers who helped to defend the humanity of African Americans. And I think that's what we need to continue doing in our immigrant communities.
Just to add a footnote to what you were saying about the Black Renaissance, the Harlem Renaissance, because it is Black History Month, what a lot of people don't realize is that the Harlem Renaissance didn't just come on its own. It really, it actually was a part of the New Negro movement.
Yes.
And the New Negro movement was where you had Southern Blacks, Caribbean Blacks, and Latinos from the Caribbean converging into Harlem and trying to figure out what life was like in this country. And so it was a race building movement to get people outside of the race, just what you're talking about, to see those inside the race differently because they assumed the worst, like what you're saying, and then didn't realize that you had people who could speak Dutch and Portuguese and French as well as English. And so therefore it was to help folks see other folks differently, much more holistically. And that's what your article did for me. It resonated quite well because you're trying to say the same thing. We don't know the trials and tribulations of the various people from Mexico or from Cuba or from your home country, Guatemala. And maybe if we did. So tell me, what, besides writing, what else could the arts do for your effort and your movement to really tell these stories much better so we can see the humanity of all of these people?
Well, one thing that we need to do is I think we really need to encourage our young people to study the humanities. I mean, I know that in a lot of immigrant families or second-generation families, you have a young person going to college for the first time, representing their family in college for the first time, and they feel the need to make money, and they feel the need to pay back their parents and their sacrifice. And so, especially in the Latino community, it's very difficult for a person with an artistic soul to pursue that kind of education, to say, I'm going to go get an MFA in creative writing, or I'm going to study theater, or I'm going to study filmmaking, because there's a sort of practical streak in our modern diaspora cultures. And so one thing I think is really important is that we need to tell our young people that if you feel a desire to be an artist, that's okay. You should pursue that. You're not betraying your family. You're not turning your back on your community by doing that. I think that's extremely important, among other things.
Okay, that's a good start. No, because it's with all generations. You'd be surprised, particularly those from minority communities. Right. You push someone to be a doctor, a lawyer, a teacher.
Exactly.
You don't push them artists. You talked about Langston Hughes. Well, when he wanted to express to his father he wanted to be a writer, his father was very disappointed. He was like, that's no life for you. And he left his father in Mexico, who was living in Mexico, went to Harlem, to New York, and the first thing he did was drop his bags off at the YMCA that is still standing on 135th Street between 7th and Lenox Avenue, and ran across the street to the old building of what is now the Schomburg Center. So yes, that's a common thing where people don't realize you can still pursue those artistic endeavor and make a living. It's hard, but some have pushed through and they've made a living with it. What else could we possibly do to help?
Well, I think that we need to fund arts education also. I think we live here in California in this era of charter schools and STEM education, science, technology, engineering, we need to fund the education of the arts and the humanities in schools. And, we also we need to push for there also to be representatives of these new communities. And I'm not just talking about the Latino immigrant diaspora, but also the many diasporas, Haitian and Ethiopian, I mentioned in my column, among others. There needs to be more representation of those voices in the industries that produce the arts, in the film industry, in the book industry, which is centered there in New York. We need to have more. We need to have more representation. Okay. And I think if these industries do that, they'll see a benefit because there is really a hunger for the stories that tell the actual truth of the country we live in now.
Or even fantasy. I don't know if you heard, the Black Panthers is doing so well with pre-sales. It is knocking people off their feet. I just read a story today how they're saying that, look, what it took to finally do a story about a superhero that was black who comes from Africa, and look at the sales and look how happy people are. It doesn't even have to be history. It could just be fantasy, and it still can resonate positively for everyone.
And the same thing has happened with Coco,
yes.
which has a box office now approaching $700 million. And Coco is about Day of the Dead, Dia de los Muertos, which has been celebrated in Mexico for centuries, generations. But one of the reasons why there is Day of the Dead celebrations in the U.S. is thanks to activists like the people out here in Los Angeles at Self-Help Graphics in East Los Angeles Arts Education Place, where they in the 1970s started doing Dia de los Muertos, Day of the Dead celebrations. And now finally Hollywood's caught up and understood the power of this, Latino tradition, and it's made big money for them. So it's not all just idealism.
Yes, I agree. Well, I just want to thank you so very, very much for joining us for this short talk. It was good. It was, we said a lot in a short period of time.
We covered a lot of ground.
We did. And I just want to thank you and hope that you be willing to come back onto our show again to talk about these issues. I just don't like to, rant. Some people, they just rant, they just complain. But, you got to also come up with some good ideas and strategies and, possibilities that people can engage in and make things really, happen. Not in the abstract, but where we all can touch it and feel it and enjoy it.
Exactly, and your program is reaching many, many people who I think hopefully they'll be transformed by some of the ideas that you put forward.
Thank you so very much. Now, you have a great week, and we hope to hear from you soon.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. And we are back with State of the Arts NYC, where we cover art. We are now getting ready to present to you that roundtable discussion with the National Assembly of State Art Agencies at the National Press Club in Washington, D.C. So I am here in Washington, D.C. This is the host for State of the Arts NYC, heard on WWII FM radio, and we are so pleased to be invited to the National
Assembly of State Arts Agencies.
Great. And we have with us the executive director, and that is
Pam Breaux.
Great. And we also have representatives from the state of South Carolina, and they're here to tell us a lot about their program. So I'm going to ask each one to introduce themselves. Let's start with you.
I'm Susan DuPlessis. I'm a program director at the South Carolina Arts Commission, and we're here today talking about the art of community rural SC.
Great. And we also have with us
Bob Reeder. I am a program director with Rural LISC, but I'm in this capacity, I'm also the advisory co-chair of the Art of Community Rural SC.
Great. And we also have with us
I am Matt Mardell. I am the director of the Colleton Museum, Farmers Market and Commercial Kitchen.
Great. So I was very pleased to come down to D.C. I want to thank Leah for inviting me here because I learned a lot. I did not realize how various state agencies were really working together to solve problems using the arts. So, Pam, you're new in this position, so tell us, how does it feel to be here in D.C. and what it's been like for you?
Well, I've been at NASA for 2.5 years now, and I love being in D.C. It's exciting for all kinds of reasons.
Okay.
I'm passionate about the benefits of the arts in the public realm, and so this is an important place to be in these conversations.
And you used to be in Louisiana dealing with culture and tourism.
That's right. I was at the Louisiana Department of Culture, Recreation, and Tourism. Most of my portfolio was on the culture side, in oversight of the arts, historic preservation, and archaeology.
Oh, wow, that's very exciting. And so for our other guests, I guess our team from South Carolina, what initiated this effort to deal with rural, arts and culture?
Well, in South Carolina, at the Arts Commission, we have a long history of working in rural.
Okay.
We're about 50 years old, and in our early inception, we had direct programs that involved rural arts and development of the field in rural communities. As time went by and more and more arts agencies and local arts groups came into being, then we backed away from some of that direct programming. But over time, what we've seen happen in rural, it's been harder and harder to make the connections. The infrastructure often isn't there to work with groups for grants and getting artists in residence in schools. And so the Art of Community Rural SC was conceived as a new way to work in rural South Carolina to primarily develop new relationships. And through a variety of relationships, we're able to then connect people to the resources that we bring as a state arts agency, so grants, technical assistance, artist services, arts and education. So we're working in that way. This has just opened the door for us, coming in through the community development realm. So it's sort of a new doorway to working in community for this State Arts Commission.
All right, and one of those examples is with your museum and farmers market. So why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
About the program. In around about 2011, our county administrator decided that it was important for our museum to upgrade its facility to get into something that's bigger, talk about local culture and local heritage a lot more. And during that phase, it was also important for him that we gave local farmers a permanent home. They were set up in parking lots around town. They had no home. So he wanted to merge the two and create this real unique organization. That success snowballed, and those farmers began to ask the questions of, where can we create value-added product now? And you need a regulated environment to do that. And so that's where the commercial kitchen model came in. We are an incubator kitchen in which people who have recipes that they believe should hit the shelves, or they want to create a catering business, or they want to see if they have the ability to start a restaurant without taking all that financial risk. They come to us. That's where we come in.
Great.
And so the Art of Community has informed us in the process now of what is our next step. We've got these great ingredients. How do we pull those assets together, and how do we move on from that point?
And then bringing in Liz. I'm familiar with Liz. Yes, I am. Liz is in real estate development quite a bit. Not solely, but quite a bit. So how does your organization, I guess, help facilitate what is happening here? I guess it's with build out or identification of property, facilities, or how to manage it?
Not entirely.
Okay.
So LISC is a big organization, and so Rural LISC is a program of a major list. So most lists are New York list, Philadelphia list, Boston list, all that Chicago list. We work with community development corporations across rural America. We're in like 45, or now maybe 48 states, and over 3,000 rural counties. Every situation being different.
Okay.
But still all being rural in the sense of being bereft of resources, being bereft of capacity, being bereft of, but having assets as well.
Okay.
That said, I come from a career trajectory of legal to community organizing to community development. So it was an opportunity for me when I realized that in these rural communities we were missing social and economic equity. We have become balkanized in our relationships. In the South, race on one side. Out west, it's who got more cows as opposed to who got fewer cows. In Appalachia, it's who lived on the house on the hill. Idea is we can't continue having these
divisions.
That's right. So that one way, not the only way. So arts and culture began for me as a way of pulling out another arrow out of my quiver to say this is what we as ruralists and our resources bring to communities in order to help them be able to bridge those divides and to create what I personally call pride in place. I lived for a few years in a city I won't name. I don't want to disparage them. I grew up on a dirt road in the South.
Okay.
I never saw trash.
Okay.
On my dirt road. We didn't even have grass in our yard. My mother swept the dirt to make sure it looked good. And I got to the city. I'm seeing trash blowing down the street. I'm seeing near empty trash cans. I'm like, whoa. How do we recreate this pride in place? To have people feel they have a part enough to want to defend. Real quickly, again, I've been around a long time. I was on a plane one time, and these people ask, in the South, it's like, who are your people and what church you go to?
Yeah.
In the North, it's what you do. And what you do defines you as opposed to who you are. And so I'm on a plane, and what do you do? And for a while, I worked in the Community Land Trust group. I said, well, I do Community Land Trust. That's community control of land for community benefit. Paper goes back up, and they're looking out the window. So one day, the guy said, so what do you do? So I'm in Homeland Security. He goes, really? Wow, that's fascinating. What aspect of Homeland Security are you in? I said, well, I'm in the piece that, I'm in the segment that we give previously disenfranchised people a voice and a piece. So they're more likely to defend their piece if they have a stake in the game. Looked at me, he's like, okay, all right. But that's it. To me, nothing works without everything working. I'm a sculptist. The whole is always greater than some of its parts.
That was very good. You explained that. And your national organization, then, what are you doing to help this? Are you facilitating or advocating nationally to like our federal lawmakers that these programs really work and why they should fund them?
Absolutely. Advocacy is a big part of our portfolio, and so we definitely advocate on behalf of creative placemaking programs like these because they're a key part of why public support for the arts is so important. You know, the thing that public support does that private support doesn't do is it attempts, by the nature of its mandate, to connect to all communities and all people. That's the mandate, right? And certainly every public agency at any level is a work in progress in achieving that mandate, but that goal is to serve people in every community, no matter the size, no matter the location. And so that's an important part of our advocacy role related to initiatives like this. We also have an educational role related to this initiative because NASAA provides professional development for state arts agencies. And so we're the place that offers a number of different kinds of opportunities for state arts agencies to learn about how to do this work better. One example would be we're the place where state arts agencies learn from each other. So as different states engage in creative placemaking work at different levels, right? For urban centers, for rural areas. Some do it with very formal tax incentives in place. Some do it by working with communities and literally just pushing up the shirt sleeves and heightening what community engagement means, right? Between arts organizations and a state arts agency and a community, right? And so NASAA is able to leverage the lessons learned in each state individually for the benefit of all of them. Okay. So a training, professional development side, as well as an advocacy side.
But I also want to talk about cross-pollination. And when you were talking about your experience on the plane, a major flashback hit me. For many years, people who knew my grandmother, she had already passed, but I had to introduce myself, not with my name, but as Susan Bailey's granddaughter. They would say, "Who are you, child?" I said, "I'm Susan Bailey's grandchild." Oh, now I got who you are. I had to do that for years because if I didn't say that, you could kiss it goodbye. Nobody was going to say anything to me. But now, how do we do some of this cross-pollination? Because you're right. The way life is in rural parts of the country is very different from city life. and we are experiencing global warming, which is pushing more and more people out of rural communities into cities. You have cities where people are stacked on top of each other. They don't interact as much as they should. What can we learn from maybe sort of teaching each other how to build communities? Because what I'm sensing in this rural program that you're doing in South Carolina, it's about neighbors. It's not just about the arts. It's about neighbors, taking care of neighbors, and then utilizing the gifts that neighbors have. So am I hitting it correctly?
Absolutely. We started this idea not knowing that we didn't have a solution, knowing that we were not going to go in and tell people in a place what to do, or that if you only do X, Y, Z, then ABC will happen. We went into it honoring and respecting people in a place and the culture and heritage in that place. And also with the mindset that we were there to learn as much as we were to share. And that through the sharing of what home means to people, that creates unity. And that we created a community really in a 6-county region now that cares about each other. Where one county might not have, some of the people may not have ever even been to the county next door or 2 counties away. Now they all have a greater sense of themselves as part of a region. And I think for our state, we have a better sense of our state.
Okay.
Because in some ways, this was a little bit of a forgotten land.
Okay.
And so, no, this is all part of our state.
Okay.
And we come together as a whole state. And so what we're doing in this next go-round is to now begin to look at other parts of our state that we can also learn from, and taking our group in this initiative, the 6 counties, to visit, the mountains of South Carolina, or go over to Charleston and visit the urban farm over there. Learn from each other. So that peer-to-peer learning, I think, is really essential in this approach.
Now, you came from the UK.
Just
and
outside
then
of London.
What made you decide to go to South Carolina and then immerse yourself in a new community?
Well, the long story, cut real short, was I was in architecture school.
Okay.
And I was doing my postgraduate paper, and Hurricane Katrina came.
Okay.
And was kind of astounded by that. And there was a program going on out of the university at Auburn. In Alabama. So I went for a couple of weeks, did all this research, came back, wrote my postgraduate paper, and fell in love with the land, the deep south, right? And it's unlike anything I'd ever seen before, because I'd seen Disney World in New York. This was vastly different, and this was an America I did not know about.
Okay.
But I loved it.
Okay.
It was, I'm not against cities or anything, but just people have color and personality, and you get to know them on such an intimate level. And so I really enjoyed that, made friends, came back and forth for many years. Met somebody from South Carolina.
So love had to do.
Love has always got to do with it.
Okay, that answers a lot of questions. All right, but still, you have been back and forth a number of times, and you got acquainted with, the South and the land and the people and their traditions, and that also helped solidify the love that also came into your life.
Yeah.
Okay,
and
that's fair.
That community, the small town community spirit that we have. Somebody turned around to me the other day who's lived in Walterboro for almost 60 years, and they said, "You know everybody." Everybody talks to everybody, and that's how you get to know people.
Yeah.
And I've been in this role for 4 years. People come through all the time. People come through the farmer's market, the museum, the kitchen, or on the street. It's in the South. You stop and you talk, and that's art of community.
Okay, and would you say, being a part of LIST, which is really dealing with community development, like all across the the country, that the lessons that you're learning from South Carolina could in some way, and you can weigh on this too, be translated in, maybe mid-size cities and eventually urban cities, because they got something that's very interesting and very unique, and that is people caring about each other, sharing their traditions, not being ashamed of their traditions, because that's another thing. We tend to have this, big war between big city and, urban, rural or farm areas, and, there's not a lot of synergy going on.
I'd say it's almost reciprocal, because some of the work I have been doing in my capacity as rural program director for many years sort of helped guide me to this place. Nationally, LISC is also involved in creative placemaking in urban centers as well, with the same kind of goals in mind, to try to create a new place of community and a place where everybody sort of feels a part of it.
Okay.
I also think that on this urban-rural situation, the urban-rural divide, I think, is a political construct, much like race. Race being a socio-political construct. Urban-rural divide is a political construct, because when they want to divide these poor folks from these poor folks who are living similar lives, just in different sorts of locations, but it's a little bit different. You have mass transit here and don't have mass transit here, but you have the same kinds of my ED would say opportunities.
Okay.
As opposed to talent, opportunities to make something better happen. To that, and one of the things about being national, we know things that happen all over the country. In Kentucky and West Virginia and those areas that have, and Iowa, there's something called the Urban-Rural Exchange, which is intentionally working to bridge that perceived distinction between what's happening in urban and what's happening in rural. And a good friend of mine who works for the rural, what's RUPR stand for? Rural
Policy Research Institute.
Policy Research Institute would say it is a mistake for any of us who work in rural predominantly, to try to buy into that notion of urban-rural divide. Okay. Because we need alliances more than you need adversaries.
Okay. So that's great. And so, as the executive director of your agency, what goals have you set for yourself? Because, we're in a very charged political time. And at one point, the NEA was being threatened. And right now, there's, this reprieve, but we don't know for how long. And so, what challenges do you foresee? How are you going to deal with those challenges? What would you like to share?
Well, certainly we spent a good portion of 2017 as a part of the Arts Coalition, determined to keep the NEA whole, and in light of the elimination attempt that was made, and we were able to succeed at that, for the current year, for the current budget, largely because members of Congress continue to understand the impact of public funding of the arts on their communities. Their stakeholders tell them, national partners tell them, and their commitment continues to be solid. But it's important for us to keep pushing on the public front to uplift stories like the South Carolina story, to lift up the human face of the public impact, or the impact of public dollars on people and communities across the country. So that's a part of what we're doing. At the same time, we're also observing with state arts agencies a shift in how state arts agencies are connecting to
Get Ready New York.
And so we can only offer an abbreviated portion of the interview. I We'll have available this evening the entire segment, which runs 32 minutes, and you'll be able to hear it. We'll place it on both Facebook and on Twitter so that everyone could hear it. We'll probably also put it on our blog site, too, stateoftheartsnyc.wordpress.com. We're sorry that we had to cut it down because we're running out of time, but I just wanted to say that was a very engaging and lively conversation with so many different people. We also uploaded the reports as well as the testimony from the military veteran. He was so stirring. He brought almost everyone to tears on how the creative art program he is engaging in is actually helping him with his post-traumatic stress disorder, how he is trying to manage his nightmares after serving in Afghanistan. And without it, he does not believe he would be able to re-enter society successfully. So that's why the National Assembly of State Arts Agency invited me so we could hear firsthand. This is not fake news. This is not an exaggeration, so that you know that there are many different groups working with state agencies to make sure the arts is disseminated and various populations that need this access gets this access. This is really about, solving problems, developing innovation. That's why we're here on the air, sharing all of this information to you. New York is an epicenter for knowledge and understanding of the arts globally. So it isn't just about New York. It's about the world. So we just want to thank you so very much for joining us this week. We're about to end. I do have 3 small announcements. One, tonight, the French Animation Film Festival, Animation First, begins tonight. I'm on my way there right after this show. You also have the last Saturday for Masters Drawings in New York on the Upper East Side. And we also want to give a shout out to Jonah Bakar. He's become a real friend on the show. He just started a foundation where dance will be the focus of that foundation and good works that they do. So thank you so much. I want to thank all of our guests. We had a great conversation, good information, and we will see you back next week. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
There's a free celebration of culture for the entire family at the world-famous Apollo Theater during their open house weekend, Day 1, this Saturday, February 3rd, featuring comedy, dance, music, and spoken word performances, plus a panel discussion with some of today's rising stars. More information and tickets for this free event are available at apollotheater.org. Doors open at 1 p.m. this Saturday.
This is Dwight Brewster from the World of Jazz. WBAI has launched an intensified initiative to respond to your request that we cut down on the number of days of on-the-air fund drives. You can help us do that by becoming a BAI Buddy. A BAI Buddy is someone who signs up to make a recurring donation to WBAI using either a credit or debit card or EFT from your bank account. It's safe, secure, and so easy. It's simple, automatic, and it means a great deal to keeping our unique and high-quality programming on the air. Just fill out a secure BAI Buddy form on our website, and once your annual donation exceeds $25, you will become a full voting member of WBAI.
How has historically black colleges and universities helped alter the laws and the culture of this entire nation? That will be answered at the Apollo Theater this Sunday, February 4th, during their free open house weekend, Day 2, featuring the documentary Tell Them We Are Rising, and a panel discussion with Jelani Cobb, Raphael P. Roman, Stanley Nelson, and Simone Missick. For more information and tickets for this free event are available at apollotheater.org. Doors open at 1 p.m. this Sunday.
This is Cornell West, and for the best in rhythm and blues, reggae, ska, calypso, and all the musical cultures in the rich African diaspora, I listen to the Midnight Ravers on alternate Fridays over listener-sponsored non-commercial radio WBAI 99.5 FM. The Midnight Ravers, where every show is a special show.
And once again, this is WBAI New York, 99.5 FM and WBAI.org on the web. This is a listener-sponsored community radio station providing you a Pacifica state of mind since 1960. And the previous program was State of the Arts NYC with Savona Bailey-McClain, heard Fridays at 5 p.m. Stay tuned for